Hey guys, hope you had a great weekend. Mike's actually on vacation this week, so he's out of the office. But I always remind everybody, everybody else is here. So if you have any questions for ECA, everybody's there. If you have any questions for anybody here at the office, we're all here. We'll be here through the week. The only exception to that being Friday because of the Easter weekend. I believe ECA is closed completely on Good Friday.
That is
And I
correct.
know, yeah, they're closed, so they won't be open. We'll be open, but only till noon. I'm sure you'll get reminders of that through the week, but just be mindful that we're here Monday through Thursday. Friday will be a little bit different because of the Easter weekend. We always start by talking about the 5-minute moneymaker. And so this one this week was about how marketing isn't going to get easier. It's only going to get harder. We're living in a world where people are getting inundated with ads. And so what we've gotten good at is tuning them out. And so what we need to do is make sure that when we do get in front of somebody, when we do get noticed, that we're good. And the only way to make sure that we're good is to practice every day with our most important 15 daily. So make sure you're doing that. You use your own tapes. If you don't have a tape, there's the 5Q breakdown. And so you get a tape every week. So I recommend using your own tape to do the 15-minute drill. But if you don't have one, you can always use the 5-minute breakdown. But whether you're using yours or you're using this, make sure you're listening to it, because that's where we really hone in on a skill that you need to get good at in order to have success when you're meeting with people. So don't ignore these things. Make sure you're doing them, and not just doing them, but really being focused and setting aside the time to really get the most out of it. Because if you're not doing that, then you're not doing the things you need to do to really get better. And so today's call, I'm going to talk really about 3 different things, but I think they're all related in the sense that they can all help us in the way that we talk to people and in the way that we maybe even think about our practice. So some of you know, some of you don't know, but the first thing I want to talk about is I coached a boys 4th grade basketball team this year. So that's actually a picture of the team. They're the guys in white. The 2 guys in white are the team that I coached, the Raiders. That was a team that we were playing that day. That's a picture taken by a newspaper here in town that was covering the tournament. But in coaching the 4th grade basketball team, I learned some things, I guess I would say, and I think they're things that we can learn from too. So just as a little bit of background, I was actually coaching 3rd graders who were playing a year up. So they were 3rd graders playing in the 4th grade league, trying to get some experience heading into next year when they will be in 4th grade. Overall, we went 6-11. So we won 6 games. We lost 11. So we won some. We lost some too. But what I really want to talk about is the fact that 7 of those 11 losses were by 3 points or less. So just by a basket. So 1 basket either way. Rather than being 6-11, we could have been 13-4. And 6-11 for 3rd graders playing in a 4th grade league, that's not bad. But I think we can all agree that 13-4, that would have been impressive. So I'm going to throw out a question here, and I realize you guys didn't see the games, but I know you're watching a lot of basketball now, and so you'll probably be able to guess some of this. What do you think went wrong? Why do you think we ended up losing those games? What could have gone wrong? What could we have been doing that cost us the game? Let's see some answers. Yeah, somebody says 1 rebound, 1 pass. That's always the challenge with kids, rebounding. Hurried shots, missed fouls, not enough layups. Some of these people you must coach or have seen youth games, because those are exactly the kinds of things that happen. They take 2 bad shots. They're always seeing the NBA players take 3-pointers. They're passing up layups. They're not playing good defense. They don't rebound. I would say all of the things that you guys are saying are all of the reasons that we lost in those close games. And so one of the things we would do after the end of a tournament, we would go back to practice on Monday. And the close games, they probably hurt more than the other games, because you really feel like we could have won. I mean, we could have won. One basket, this way or that way, and we could have won. And so we always kind of did a debrief, and I would ask them, you know, we lost that game by 2 points or 1 point or 3 points. Let me ask you guys, what do you think happened? I'd ask them the same question that I asked you. Now remember, I'm coaching 10 kids. There were 7 losses by 3 points or less, so it's a possible 70 answers that I could have gotten. But interestingly, I only ever got one answer. So out of the possible 70 answers, this is the only answer I ever got. It was unanimous. It was the refs. They made a bad call. That cost us the game. Or they didn't make a call that they should have made, and that cost us the game. They weren't paying attention. They were letting it get too rough. That cost us the game. The refs were the only reason I ever heard that we ever lost any of the games that we ever played in that we didn't win. It was always the refs, which, when you think about it, that's actually a very savvy answer if you're a 9-year-old. Because if it's the refs, do you have to work on your defense? No, you just need better refs. If it's the refs, do you have to work on your offense? No, you just need better refs. If it's the refs, do you have to work on your rebounding? Nope, it's the refs, just need better refs. If it's the refs, do we have to work on our shooting or our passing? Nope. If it's the refs, do we have to work on anything? Nope. All we need are better refs. And so it's sad, but it's true that even at that early age, they don't want to look in the mirror. It was never our fault that we lost. It wasn't our defense. It wasn't our offense. It wasn't our effort. It was the refs. Now, here's the thing. What kind of coach would I have been if I'd let them get away with that? I would have been a bad coach, because we wouldn't have worked on anything. We would have just hoped and prayed for better refs at the beginning of every game. But as it turns out, what we needed to do was really work on all the things that you guys said. We needed to work on our shooting. We needed to work on our passing. We needed to work on our defense. We needed to work on all kinds of things. And as advisors, it turns out that we're kind of susceptible to falling into some of the same traps. If you've been out to training any time in the past 6 months, you've seen this slide. So what this is it's a wirehouse. It's a broker-dealer who polled all of their advisors, asking them the question, why did you lose your last case? And if you start looking at the reasons, they didn't see any value in what I brought to the table. They already had a good relationship with their guy. They didn't think they could save money. They didn't think it was going to be a compelling improvement. They loved their guy, just kicking tires. Not ready for a change. Indecisive. The time wasn't right. 100% of these reasons, not my fault. It's the refs. I don't need to get any better at what I do. I just need better people. All I need to do is just hope that I get better people, because I don't need to work on my presentation. I don't need to get good at anything. I don't need to change anything I'm doing. And the problem is, I would tell the guys, if we don't look in the mirror, we're not going to get any better. We're not going to win those games. If we want to win those games, we're going to have to get better. And that means it starts with us saying, we got to be better. We got to play better defense. We got to play better offense. We got to figure out a way to rebound more. We got to pass more. We got to trust each other more. Those are the kinds of things we have to do too. You know, accountability is a big part of getting better. Making sure that you're constantly working on improving the things that you're in control of, so that when you get in these close games, you're good. You're constantly improving, so that these kinds of things don't really affect you. Again, like we talked, we went 6-11, but we could easily have been 13-4. Now, they didn't really have the experience. This was kind of a throwaway year for them. But for us, this is our livelihood. This is the kind of thing that we need to be, if this is what we do, we need to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we're getting better every day, or at least every week. Because you've heard us talk that if you just got 2% better every week, by virtue of compounding, you'd be 300% better by the end of the year. And that's our goal. Because what kind of coaches would Mike and I or Jerry or anybody be if we let people get away with thinking, oh, it's not my fault? Until you get better, there's no way that you're going to be able to improve your record. There's one other thing we learned in the course of the basketball season, and remember, I was working with 8- and 9-year-old boys. And so somebody actually put this up there. Well, there was a game where we were ahead at halftime 14-4. So we were winning at halftime 14-4. We lost that game 18-17. So what do you think happened? Let's see some answers. We're ahead 14-4, but in the second half, we fall apart and they win 18-17. Yeah, I think that somebody said it. It was a lack of focus. We just decided that we had it won. And so we didn't try that hard in the second half. And so we were up by 10, but you know, you jog back. One of the things we would do in practice is we would run from block to block or from end line to end line. And I would tell the guys, you have 5 seconds to get from one end of the court to the other. So we would go, and then they would run as hard as they could, and for the most part, they made it in less than 5 seconds. Well, then we'd turn around and do it again. And we'd turn around and do it again. And we'd turn around and do it again. And I would tell them the point of this is that's how fast you have to run down the court on every possession. Are we doing that? Are we running down the court that hard every single time? And guess what everybody told me? No. Well, here's the problem when you don't do that. You jog back, and guess what? They throw it up the court and get an easy layup. They get 2 of those, 2 easy layups, because we just jog back just 2 times. We jog back. We run back every other time, but those 2 times that we just jog back, they get an easy layup. That's 4 points. So if you lose by 1 point, guess what the problem was? You didn't take every possession seriously. If you lose by 2 points, guess what the problem was? You didn't take every possession seriously. If you lose by 3 points, guess what the problem was? You didn't take every possession seriously. You didn't focus. And so and we lost 7 games by 3 points or less. So the next time I told them, the next time you lose by 3 or less, don't cry. Get serious. Get focused. What that means for us with the 21-point checklist is this. I have to take all of these seriously. Every single one of these topics. I can't just jog back on a couple of them and take them for granted. I have to do Survivor's Guide like that's the thing that's going to bring them on. The Survivor's Guide. I can't take that off. I have to do Update Will like that's the thing that's going to make them a client. I can't take that off. I have to do Update Power of Attorney like that's the only thing that's going to make them a client. I can't just jog that down the court and take that off. If I take any of these plays off, I could lose in a close game. So a lot of times when I listen to tapes, and I understand it, the client is anxious to get to the bottom of the list, the financial things, because that's what they're there for, to see what we can do for them financially. They want us to hurry through the top, and a lot of times I think we feel some pressure to hurry through the top. And when we hurry through the top, guess what we're saying? Now you don't need to take any of that seriously. I don't. That's why I'm hurrying. That's why I'm hurrying you through it. Let's just jog down. Let's just go through the motions. Let's just jog through these so we can get to the good stuff. Well, I'll tell you, just like the kids, you don't know what possession is going to cost you the game. So my recommendation is play every possession like it matters. We don't know which one of these topics is going to get us a deal or lose us a deal, especially when we get in a close game. A close game for us is the guy, I'll tell you the truth, I get calls from people that say something like this, man, this guy, so I've been meeting with some people with, 100,000, 200,000, but this guy's got 2 million. I would love to get that guy. If I could get that guy, that would make a huge difference. And I get it, it would make a huge difference. But you know what you have to be to get that guy? Good on every possession. We can't jog any of these up the court. We have to take every one of these seriously, and we have to be good at every one of these. That's how you get that guy. That's how you win close games. So I guess my point is, it's accountability and focus that get us what we want. Those are the things that are required to win. We have to be accountable to ourselves, and we have to be focused on all of these topics. Because if you're constantly working at getting better and holding yourself accountable and not blaming anybody else, and if you're focused on doing every single one of these things the best that you can, you're going to win a lot more games than you lose. That's how you go from being 6-11 to 13-4. Just hold yourself accountable and focus. Okay? So let's change subjects completely here for a second. So remember, hold yourself accountable, get focused, use those 5-minute money makers and those breakdowns to really help you move forward each and every day. And if not each and every day, every week. There can't be a week that goes by that we're not feeling like we're getting better. Okay? Let me ask you this question. I'll be surprised if anybody gets it. Anybody know who this is? It's just your standard guy, so I won't hold you in suspense. Has anybody ever heard that saying, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it? Have you heard that? And if you ignore history or you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, this guy, his name is Henri Poincare, and he was a French mathematician who proved beyond a mathematical doubt that whoever said that anyone who doesn't know history is doomed to repeat it, whoever said that, they're full of crap. He proved that mathematically, that you're full of crap if you think that. He's actually known for solving something called the three-body problem. So that's kind of his claim to fame, solving a mathematical problem called the three-body problem. So what's the problem? Well, imagine there are 3 massive objects in space, whether they're stars or planets or something like that. And they're all in the same system, meaning they can't really escape each other's gravitational pull. They're kind of connected in some way, and they can't get away from each other. So here's what you know. You know the position of these planets, let's call them. You know their mass, you know their speed, you know the direction that they're traveling, and you know how gravity works. So you know precisely how each object is acting on the other 2 objects. So here's the challenge. Come up with a formula that will help you to predict where the objects will be at some point in the future. Now that problem had been around for hundreds of years, where everybody's searching for this formula. And you would think it can't be that hard because we know so much. We know where the planets are, we know how big they are, we know how gravity works, we know what direction they're headed, we know how fast they're going. We should be able to figure this out. Well, Poincare actually solved the problem. He proved mathematically that you can't find a formula like that. In 1887, he proved that the motion of the 3 objects, with the exception of a few special starting cases, is non-repeating. It's called a chaotic system, meaning that the historical pattern of the object positions has 0 zero predictive power in figuring out where those objects will be sometime in the future. So it doesn't matter what they've done in the past. It has zero predictive power into what they'll do in the future. That's why you can't come up with a formula. He didn't just speculate that. He proved it mathematically that there is no formula. Doesn't exist. There's no algorithm. There's nothing that you can do to solve that problem. And that was the answer to that problem. There is no answer. Now notice, he's describing it as a chaotic system. But a chaotic system doesn't mean we don't know anything. I mean, we knew a lot. We knew that they were planets. We knew how big they were. We knew their mass. We knew their speed. We knew where they were at. We knew what direction they were heading. We know how gravity works. That's not what makes it chaotic, the fact that we know very little or that it's random in some way. It's not. We know a lot. It's just that they act on each other in such a way that they're never in the same place twice. That you could look back millions of years and we will never have seen them in the same place twice. And so there's no way that we could use the past as any kind of predictor. There's no algorithm that a human can possibly discover to solve this problem. It just doesn't exist. So here's a picture of a mathematical simulation of the three-body problem. And so there's a planet that's the red orbit, represented by the red lines. There's a planet represented by the green line, that orbit, and there's another body or planet represented by the blue line, and that's their orbit. Again, what Poincare proved is that there is no formula where you can plug in the initial information and get the right answer for where any of the objects will be at some future point in time. No human can predict the future of this system. Now, the way I worded that is kind of key. I said no human can predict the future of this system. So what do you think I'm about to tell you? That no human can do it. No human can do it, but guess what? A computer can. Not by using a formula or an algorithm, because Poincare proved that there is no formula, there is no algorithm. So here's what a computer would do. Now remember, you know everything about these three objects, so none of the physics here is a mystery. So if you can do the calculation quickly enough, you can compute where all three objects will be 1 second from now, but that means you have to compute it in less than a second. And then you can then take that information and compute 1 second from then. And then you can take that information and compute 1 second from then. So we're 3 seconds in. And so on and so on. And with enough processing power, and this requires a lot of processing power. In fact, in order to calculate where the objects will be 100 years from now, 1 second at a time, we don't have enough processing power in the world yet. There's not enough computers, there's not enough processing power that we could do that. But in theory, it would be possible. Even though it wouldn't be possible to solve for the outcome using a formula, we could approximate the future that way. Now, we can't do it because we don't have the computing power yet, but in theory, it should be possible. Now, here's where this kind of relates to us. It's a hard concept to wrap your head around, this difference between calculating the future and being able to predict the future. But once you really grasp this, it changes everything. And so here's the first thing that as financial advisors, we need to realize, and this is how this impacts us. This isn't at all how we use computers in our investing strategy today. So what a computer can do, we don't use computers that way when it comes to investing. Remember now, the way that computers cannot calculate an answer to the three-body problem is by looking at the historical data of where the objects have been. So it doesn't do any good for the computer to look to the past. In a chaotic system, and remember, a chaotic system doesn't mean we don't know anything. We could know a lot. It doesn't matter how hard or how fast or how deep you look at the historical data. There's no predictive pattern. There's no secret algorithm hiding in the data. And yet this is exactly what we have all of our computers doing when it comes to looking at the markets, the financial industry. They're always looking at the data from the past to look for patterns that are going to give us some magic algorithm for predicting what's next. See, the only thing that the past gives you in a chaotic system is something that scientists would call inertia. Now, they mean something a little bit different by that than we do, but really, you're not going to find any pattern, I guess is my point. Now, you can be tricked because of the inertia into there might be temporary patterns in all of that. And you can get fooled into thinking you found a pattern, but the thing you have to realize is it's a mirage. It won't last. I mean, if I put this diagram up again, there are people who are going to look at that long enough and hard enough and study it, and they're going to swear that they see a pattern in that. But they're the same people who are going to tell you that the pattern's obvious. Stocks always see a big jump the year after the American League team wins the World Series. That's the pattern. You've heard things like that, right? You've heard other things like, oh, no. If it's an off-year election and Democrats win, the market's going to dive. If the Super Bowl winner comes from a city that starts with the letter in the first half of the alphabet, the market's going to go up. We've heard things like that. That's people finding patterns where patterns do not exist. And what Poincare proved is that there's no pattern to the stock market. It's a chaotic system. You can look at the past all you want, and you're not going to find anything. I'll give you an example of that. There tends to be this theory. Now remember, just because it's a chaotic system doesn't mean we don't know a lot. Here's an example of how you can be led astray by finding patterns where none exists. Now there's an idea that's popular today. And I'm not saying that there isn't any truth to it. Here's the idea that if you buy the stocks of good companies, the stock's price is going to go up over time. That the value, the goodness of the company, however you define that, has some direct relationship to the price of the stock. Good companies will have good price, will show good growth. So if you buy good companies, however you define good, you're going to see the price of that stock go up regularly over time. That's just, we all have heard that. We all believe that to some extent. I believe it to some extent. But remember, in a chaotic system, it's not that we don't know anything. We know a lot. It's not that we have to deny that there's any truth to the fact there is such a thing as good companies. There are. We know there's a planet out there that moves a certain way. That's a given. There are good companies. There are companies that are better than others, however you want to look at that or define that. It's just a fact. There are. We don't have to deny that good companies oftentimes have good stock performance. We can acknowledge that and say that's a truth. That's a truth in the system. Just like we can say there are two planets out there and this is the way they move and this is how gravity works. That's the truth. What we can't say is we know where those planets will be 2 years from now based on their position and their mass and their speed and their velocity and the physics of gravity. We don't know that. We don't have any way of computing that. Strangely, we don't. Just like we can't say, we can acknowledge that good companies oftentimes have good stocks. But we can't predict that these good companies will have good stocks sometime in the future, or that their stock performance will be that much better than any other stock performance sometime in the future. We can't. A good example of that is today. Do good companies have good stock prices today? Yeah, they do. So do bad companies. It wasn't a very good predictor these last 10 years. Why? Well, because there was this third object that threw everything out of whack. It was monetary policy. Nobody knew that the Fed was going to lower interest rates and sell a bunch of bonds and inject all this cash into the economy. And even if we knew they were going to do that, we had no idea the extent to which they were going to do it. And even if we knew they were going to do it and we had some idea of the extent to which they were going to do it, we had no idea the effect it was going to have. Basically, the effect that it's had is it's caused the Dow to go to somewhere between 23 and 25,000, depending on the week that you look, and all ships rise in a rising tide. Bad companies are doing their stock prices are doing just as good companies. So if you spent the last 10 years buying dogs, you came out smelling like a rose, just like everybody else. So if what you were doing the last 10 years is researching companies and putting in a lot of time into making picks, it was a waste. It was worthless. Now, that doesn't mean that someday it won't pay off for you. But that doesn't mean that someday the Fed won't unwind what they've done. And even if we knew that someday they were going to unwind what they've done, we don't know the extent or the speed at which they're going to do it. And even if we knew that someday they were going to do it, and we could kind of guess the speed at which they were going to do it, we still wouldn't know the effect. It could be that because of what they do when they unwind what they've done, that even the stocks of good companies are going to go down. So the idea that a good company is going to have a good stock, it has some relevance and there is some truth to it, but because there's no predictive pattern in a chaotic system, we can't bet our house on it. We don't know. There could be a trade war with China that could throw all of that upside down. The Fed may or may not unwind things too fast. That could throw all of that upside down. There could be a war with North Korea that could throw all of that upside down. So while it's generally true and we might want to go ahead and even make decisions based on that, we can't bet our house on it. Because there's too many variables, and Poincare proved that even if you know a lot, in that kind of a system, there's no way to predict. What that means for us is there's no algorithm or investment formula that can predict future market conditions, which means there's no algorithm or formula that can protect your clients from downturns. So if you're working with a money manager that says that they have a strategy to buffer losses, I wouldn't bet my house on it. It's mathematically proven to be a fact that there's no way to know that. And that's why the physicists who are working as money managers don't pretend to know that. What they're doing is they're using computers to exploit second by second inefficiencies that they discover in the market so that they can make pennies and nickels. But because they have hundreds of billions of dollars, those pennies and nickels add up to a lot. But that's what they're doing. They're not even pretending to be able to predict the future beyond the next second. They have no idea what's going to happen. So given that, what do we do? What can we take away from that, and how can we look at what we do and talk to the people that we talk to? Because it's all good in theory, but what are we going to do when we actually sit down in front of somebody taking all of that into consideration? What are we going to do? Well, the first thing, it occurs to me that there are really two things that we can do. The first thing we can do is something called minimax regret. Now, minimax regret, that's not something we talk about in the financial services industry, but it's something that people talk about, scientists talk about when they talk about game theory, when they talk about how you should make decisions when they're playing different games. Minimax regret is a classic game theory strategy for dealing with uncertain systems, which is what the stock market is. The idea is simple, but the implications are profound. Instead of seeking to maximize returns, we should seek to minimize our maximum regret. So minimax regret means minimize your maximum regret. There's two, I guess there's a fork in the road. You could go after the best and highest return possible, but that's a fool's errand. That's what all the physicists and mathematicians would say. That's a fool's errand. You could do that. You could try and maximize your return, or you could minimize your maximum regret. What would be your maximum regret? For the people that we work with, what's their maximum regret? What's the one thing that they probably fear more than anything else? Running out of money. Losing your lifestyle. Not being able to go on that vacation that you used to go on for 10 years in a row. Not being able to go on that cruise that you kind of made an annual thing. Not being able to buy that car that you've always driven for the last 20 years because you can't afford it anymore. That would be their maximum regret. So we have to seek to minimize that. We have to talk to them in such a way that they tell us that they're not looking for the absolute most return. They're looking for the thing that's going to help them maintain their lifestyle and avoid the thing that would be their maximum regret, which is losing that lifestyle or losing all of their money. So that's one thing that we can do. Really realize that it's our job to help people to minimize their maximum regret. Make sure they don't end up in that place. The second thing that we can do, and maybe this is more important than any of the others, is adopt a philosophy of what some people call profound agnosticism when it comes to investing. What that is we don't just embrace the notion that no one has a crystal ball in the system. We don't just acknowledge that, yes, that's true, no one has a crystal ball, but we actually get kind of annoyed when we hear people say that they do. Kind of pisses us off when people say, I know how to buffer losses. I know a strategy that's going to give you the best return. Nobody knows that. And so we shouldn't pretend. Because quite frankly, guys, that's how people get led astray. This is the quote that kind of led me to think about this. Where do we lose good people? When they convince themselves that they found the answer, either in the form of a charismatic person or more dangerously still, a charismatic idea. We lose good people when they convince themselves that they found the answer in a chaotic system where no answer exists. There are no answers in the stock market. And anybody who says they found one is leading people astray. And when we lead people astray, we're going to lose some good people. Some good people are going to suffer the consequences because we thought we were smarter than the math or the physics or the system. So be careful. The only thing we should be telling people is, hey, whatever forces that are at work at any given time, if they cause the market to go up, well, you'll go up too. Those forces will lift you up too. If whatever forces are at work at any given time cause the market to go down, well, you're going to go down too. But fortunately, the forces that are at work cause the market to go up more than they cause it to go down. So we should be okay if we balance our portfolios and our expectations with a 50-50 mix of growth and safety that prepares us for whatever might happen. That 50-50 is how we minimax regret. That's how we make sure that there's a very, very, very tiny infinitesimal chance of realizing maximum regret. Don't have all your market or all your money in the market. Don't have it all in play. Have some of it sitting safely on the sideline. That's the only way to minimize that regret that you could feel if something were to go wrong. Changing subjects just again now. Let me ask you a different question. What's the problem with bonds? Why don't we recommend bonds nowadays? Let's see some answers. Why not bonds? What's wrong with bonds, or why should we be leery of bonds these days? Yeah, that's exactly right. Interest rates. If interest rates go up, bonds are going to take a bath. With interest rates where they're at, we've already seen it. Interest rates are going in what direction? So where do we help people discover that for themselves in the 21-point checklist meeting? At that exposure to interest rate volatility talk. That's where they tell us that this is a bad time to be in bonds because of interest rate volatility. The problem's so severe that last week we even talked about how Roger Ibbotson published an article recommending that people have 60% of their money in the market, but 40% not in bonds. But where did he say? Yeah, fixed indexed annuities. Don't have your money in bonds, whatever you do, fixed indexed annuities. So what I want to do is walk you through something that you could see when you send in when you email investments for a Morningstar analysis to us. We send you back the Morningstar reports. So I want to show you some things that you could get back from me. So one of the things you're going to get back from me is that averages page, and that's how you know what goes in the boxes in step 4 of the software. But in addition to the averages page, you'd also get some graphs. So here's a graph for the equity portion of someone's portfolio. So what's the purpose of this graph? What am I helping people to discover with this graph? You know, we say a picture paints 1,000 words. So what does this picture tell us? Let's see what some answers are. What does this picture tell us? Picture tells us that most of these investments, because the circles are the investments, there's a key down here. You're not seeing the entire key. But nearly all, maybe all but 2, except for number 2 and number 21, they're all taking more risk than the market. And yet they're either getting less return than the market or less return than they should for the amount of risk that they're taking. Now, do we ever stop there? Because that's easy for them to discover. They always say, oh, no, we're taking more risk and getting less return. But we don't stop there, right? In fact, if you looked at last week's 5Q breakdown, tape breakdown, it was all about motive. It's not enough to get them to say, oh, we're taking too much risk for not enough return. That's not enough. We have to get to the motive. Why wouldn't he have shown you this? And they always end up concluding through a guided discussion with some help from us asking the questions, them answering that the reason he didn't do it is because he was afraid if they saw this, they might change advisors. And he didn't want them to change advisors because he wanted to keep them as clients so he could continue to make money. He was really looking out for himself. He wasn't looking out for them. So this paints a very powerful picture of that. This is a very powerful picture of how they're taking too much risk with their equities, not getting enough return. And the reason that he never showed them that is because he was afraid if they saw it, they would leave him. And so he intentionally hid it from them. Now I want to show you another graph. This is their bonds. Does it paint the same picture? No. In fact, you might look at it and say, well, this actually paints the opposite picture. Now, the benchmark isn't the market anymore. It's the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index. So we're comparing bonds to bonds. But why do these look so good? Oops. Why do these look so good? Now remember, we're looking back 3 years. So where were interest rates the last 3 years? Low. And because of the inverse relationship between interest rates and bonds, bonds actually kicked butt the last 3 to 5 to 7 years. Because the Fed, again, was intentionally holding down rates. Now, that's not the problem with bonds. The problem with bonds, like we talked about, is the direction that rates are going forward. The direction that rates they've already announced increases. They've already announced that you're going to see more increases. They've already announced you're going to see more increases at a faster clip. And so we know what this graph is going to look like 3 years from now, but that's not what it looked like 3 years prior. And so what do? We've got this graph that shows, well, the equities, that's bad. But the bonds haven't been so bad, hadn't been that bad in the past. So do we recommend that people stay in bonds? No, quite the opposite. We recommend that, knowing what we know now about interest rates, now is the time not to be in bonds. Knowing what we know now, Ibbotson is even saying, don't be in bonds. That's a bad place to be. You're much better off. Now, he's an equity guy. He's a stock guy. He's the inventor of the Ibbotson charts. He's the one saying you're much better off being in stocks and not bonds. Don't be in bonds. Be in annuities. You'll do way better in annuities in the environment that we're in than you would ever do in bonds going forward. So do not. Roger Ibbotson is saying, don't be a fool. Don't be in bonds. But yet we have this graph saying it wasn't a bad place to be the last 3 years. So what do I do with this graph when I'm actually in a meeting? When I'm actually in a meeting, what I do, it helps to look at the areas of concern. And sometimes when you create one of these lists and you call me and you say, well, let's walk through this together. Let's put a game plan together. Let's put a game plan together, the two of us, not just you on your own. That's one of the things that we do, is we do some strategizing. We kind of get down to the level of individual tactics and decide, what are we going to show? How are we going to show it? Where are we going to show it? What is the case exactly that we're going to make? Now, the 21-point checklist does a good job of telling us what we should talk about and the order that we should talk about it in. We talk every week about how you should talk about these things and how you should learn these things. But sometimes it helps just, at least with the first 4 or 5, because you'll see that after 4 or 5, some of the things we're doing are the same things over and over and over, so you kind of get it. But at least with the first 4 or 5, kind of working with me hand in hand to figure out, just from a tactical standpoint, exactly how are we going to approach this. So risk-reward issues comes down way here at the bottom, very bottom of this 21-point checklist. That's where I would show this graph. When we talk about risk-reward issues, I'm showing the risk-reward graph, the risk-reward scatter plot. Now, I typically don't, if the bond one looks like this, I don't show the bond graph at this place. So why do I even send it to you if I recommend that you don't even show it? Well, because I don't want you to feel like we're hiding something from you. And I don't want you to feel like you're hiding something from the client. We're not. What I tell people is, what you're looking at here is a graph of your stock funds, of your stock investments. So all those circles, those colored circles with the numbers, that's American Funds Euro Pacific Growth. That's American Funds Washington Mutual. That's small company. That's Realty. That's Dodge and Cox stock. Those are you. Do those names look familiar? Yeah, those are my investments. So all of these are your stock investments. Now your bond investments, they're not on here. Here's why. When we looked at your bond investments, we talked about them earlier. Remember? What did we say was the problem with your bond investments? And then I will get them to quickly acknowledge it and walk through it just quickly again. Only has to be quick because remember, we're down here at the risk reward part of the meeting. So I'm just reminding them that the only reason we're looking only at the stocks is we already looked at the bonds. And did we? Yeah, a couple topics up. And what did we discover? And now they can tell you. And the reason they can tell you is because we talked about it just 10 minutes ago. If they can't tell you, then we know we have a problem. Everything we went through went in one ear and out the other. That's a problem. We should have identified that problem when we were asking questions, when we were going through the interest rate volatility. But hey, better late than never, right? Now that we know that we have a problem, we can just, this is a natural place to circle back and make sure that they get it. But I want you to know, because I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I didn't know I didn't need to show that. No. Now, if you're not going to show it, you have to have a reason. We can't just not show things and hide things from people. We have to have a reason. But is this a valid reason? We already looked at it. We already talked about it. And what did we conclude? Well, that while it may have been a good time to be in bonds in the past, it's not a good time now because interest rates are going up. Right. And if interest rates go up, what's going to happen? Well, these are going to get hammered. And when we looked, did we say it was going to get hammered a little or a lot? No, a lot. And remembering not to stop there, but to continue and get motive. Why didn't he then explain that to you the last time you talked? Get them to identify and acknowledge the motive. Motive is so key to everything that we do. So make sure, again, that's what we talked about in the 5Q breakdown this past week, making sure we're getting motive. And we use the turnover as an example of making sure that we're getting motive. Because when you've mastered the crib notes and the motive being the key, and you're getting better every day by doing your MIFT and your GOTS, you're paying attention to the 5-minute moneymaker and the breakdowns, that's when you bring on every client you want. That's when you go from being 6 and 11 to 13 and 4. It's not rocket science. You just have to focus, hold yourself accountable, and work at getting better every week, if not each and every day. So that's it. Again, Mike's out of the office today, but everybody else is here, the exception to that being on Friday, but we'll send you reminders of that as we get into the middle of the week. So hope you guys have a great week. Again, feel free to contact anybody. We're all still here, and we will talk to you next Monday. Thanks, guys.